Y'all, we got to talk about episode 9, because, oh my God, this was such a great episode. So, right out of the keep, we knew exactly what to expect from this. We knew that this was basically going to be the launch of, I say the last hurrah, but basically like Belle's escape plan, or I guess sort of to be. But there's so much that happened here. It is insane. Now, first things first, I shamefully do have to admit we are a bit beyond where I am in the novels. So, unfortunately, I can't compare too much from from the novels and all that. For those of you that came to the live stream last night for Dongro, we talked a little bit about that. But this episode... All right, let's get the numbers out of the way, okay? And animation-wise, this is one of those... I want so much more out of this series animation-wise. I know it was just delayed, and I respect that what they were trying to do is bring their A game. But I'm going to give it a 7 in the animation department. A lot of the series, a lot of this episode was dialogue, okay? And in that dialogue, you have a lot of opportunities for like subtle motion and subtle frame movements and things like that JC Staff has never quite hacked. So I took a point off for that. I took 2 points, however, off, and I'm going to assume at this point that you've watched the episode. Not that it's a major spoiler, but there's like the one big money shot in this episode where Hestia is at the top of the Tower of Babel, and a thing happens. You've watched the episode. You already know. She basically turns all of Arario, with the help of Hermes, into, like, essentially her sacred flame. That's why the episode's called Vesta. That's, like, basically her power, right? So she turns the entire town essentially into, like, basically every piece of wood that is burning in town, more or less, is now on the level of, like, one of her disciples. It's crazy how this plays out. So, in this moment, there's this big dramatic, like, 3D motion where it kind of, like, the camera kind of, like, pans around her and goes to, like, this big 3D motion, and, you get this big dramatic shot. Here's my frustration with this, and this is indicative of what I've been saying from the start. If you're gonna, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, would not have been an issue. But we have had so much progress in anime, specifically, over the last, 5 to 10 years, that I would say a shot like this should be, like, your moment. Every single frame, all 24 frames, should be perfectly, if not drawn, at least, like, the tweens should be really, really, really sharp and I understand what they did. They kept it like a 12 frame, so basically the way to kind of assume this is like every other frame that you see, every other drawing that you see on screen, every other one is a fresh shot. But the thing that frustrates me about JC Staff, and the thing that a lot of other studios get, we covered Dragon Ball Daima on one of my other channels. We covered Wistoria here on this channel. And I've been catching up on a lot of other shows. And personally, in my life, I watch a lot of other anime series. And a lot of other studios have kind of got this concept. A fresh one that just comes to mind is not Gainax. Studio Kira is working... They're an offshoot of Gainax, is working on a new Gundam series. I'm a big Gundam fan, and the trailer really showcases a lot of this stuff very well, where the tweens, the shots between your, like, big action-y sequences, is drawn in such a way that it adds motion without actually adding motion, if that makes any sense at all. Basically, the frames kind of like, they look like they blend a little bit. Lines are kind of, drawn with a little bit of like a, say a gradient, for lack of a better way to put it. Action lines and blurred portions of this to basically make it look like the scene is moving when it necessarily isn't. On top of that, you have a lot of studios like Mappa and people like that will utilize 3D animation or auto tweening or other types of, we've talked about, using AI for auto tweening and stuff like that to really make these scenes come to life. And so while they're not necessarily drawing all 24 frames in that maybe 1 second of animation. They're only drawing 12, but they're using technology in order. Some place, I think Mappa actually does do all 24, but nevertheless, a lot of studios are really in 3D animation is very a great example of this, where you make your keyframes and the computer makes up the rest of it. It actually, automatically does a lot. So you only tell the computer, I want my arm here and then here, and it takes 3/4 of a second to make that happen, right? And then the computer automatically goes, okay, well, it has to do this. In anime, you actually have to draw those out or use another tool that kind of automatically makes that happen. If you've watched a lot of standard 2D animation, especially thinking of like, a lot of children's animation today, or even primetime animation, shows like Archer and stuff like that, where they are clearly using a digital tool to produce that, it's roughly the same thing. It's essentially, for lack of a better way to put it, a puppet, and you've got like an arm drawn here and an arm drawn here, and the tool makes that happen. In anime, a lot of animators are using tools that essentially will make a couple of blurred lines. If you have a TV at home that has like a high frame rate, and you've ever noticed that like motions are smoother, it's literally the same type of thing. Now, why am I harping on about this? Because if you watch this 3-dimensional sequence with any level of like intricacy, you'll notice that every 12 frames are really well constructed, beautifully drawn shots. But there's not a lot of those tweens, not a lot of those blurred lines, not a lot of things that add motion to it. And I think in 2024, it pains me because they delayed this episode for production purposes. And I kind of feel like it was probably scenes like that they were trying to get just right. And it's, like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. They're doing their best to bring what they think is going to work. But it's a lot of effort, but it doesn't work in the end. And so I take 2 points off, understanding and appreciating that they did a lot to make this episode shine. And it's 7 out of 10 is still a fantastic, a well-constructed episode. But I got to take points off at the end of the day because it could be better. And that's my frustration. I've harped on about this episode after episode after episode. Sound design wise, I'm going to give it a 9. There wasn't anything egregious, but it was really well done. Story is a 12 out of 10. Story was next. Oh my God, the story is so good. I commend Omori because this dude knows how to craft an amazing story. This dude knows how to like pull on our heartstrings and really like being able to write the nuance of literally 3 characters that are being passed back and forth between 2 physical bodies has got to be an exhausting level of mental gymnastics. And this dude does it with I dare say, perfect competency. So any points I take off for the animation, I easily give back to the story. 100%. I adore everything about Omori's writing style. If you've been watching our reviews of the Wistoria manga, I love Omori's writing. In fact, the only reason I'm behind in the novels is just because with our schedules as adults, sometimes it's very hard to do all the YouTube stuff that I do and have a family and then make time to read all the novels. It's just very, very difficult. Not that I don't desire to. I own them all. I love them. And when I do get to read them, I am immersed in them and I adore them. I really, really can't say enough great stuff about Omori's writing. That's enough gushing. Let's get into the review portion of the episode because my God, did I love this episode. Oh, man. All right. So first things first, we've got to address the elephant in the room. Bell is known since the minute that this season started what was up. Bell is well aware of what's going on. He is no dummy, right? But Freya kind of has been treating him like that, if that makes any sense at all. And I get her whole goal was to break him down to the point at which she can manipulate him. It's like the ultimate form of gaslighting. But at the beginning of this episode, Bell is steadfast. He knows this is what's happening. I am now aware. I am no longer asleep, and, I will not succumb to what has been put before me, in so many ways of describing it. So Bell really is absolutely just a hoss here. And I think it's really interesting. I was very critical of Hedon, and some of you guys didn't like that in the comments. But I love when Bell is like given all these guards and then they just kind of like pass out, how it's clearly Hedon that made that happen. I did say Hedon hates Bell. I did say that. I know he doesn't really hate him, but there's a lot of animosity there and a lot of like secondhand frustration, like a lot of like what you saw going on with Horn, with what's, all the stuff that Freya is going on. Because these people, ultimately, at the end of the day, they really, truly love and appreciate Freya. Like, Freya is their deity, and they would do anything for her. And I say anything. Clearly not anything. There are some things, I do anything for love, but I won't do this one random thing. And Horn 100% betrays her in this one. It was crazy. And the fact that Bell, and in fairness, Bell never really caught on to what was going on with Seer because he really hasn't been immersed in it. He doesn't kind of understand it. And it's a real, like, crazy. I mean, to think that Horn was originally Seer, gave her name to Freya. Freya uses Seer, as she explains it, like basically a cosplay. She cosplays Seer. There's just no, it is what it is. There's no mincing words there. And Horn still has the ability to transform into Seer from time to time. And it really, Seer essentially is a third entire person, a personality that they can kind of like pass back and forth and whatever. I say what you will, it's exactly what it is. It's essentially 3 minds, 2 bodies, and somebody's always in limbo. So it's real crazy to think about. And then, keeping track of who's what, when, where, and why, and how is wild. Just absolutely wild. So the fact that basically Bell's more or less aided to escape by both Horn, I say escape, sort of, address everybody by Horn and by Hedon, and to a lesser extent Otarl, it's just wild. It's just super crazy. And in the midst of all this, we get a shot of the Hermes Familia passing out all of those wooden sticks, basically the bundles of wood for. And it was kind of like a question of like, that's usually the Ganesha Familia's whole thing, and why is the Hermes Familia doing it? And Lelune is like, even notes, she's like, this wood smells like blood. And unless you really pay close attention, I'll admit, even when I was watching the episode, I didn't fully I was like, what are they doing with this? I didn't even fully put on what would end up happening. But then we kind of just get a little bit more of what's happening with the Freya Familia. And then obviously Horn, who helps Ryu escape. And Ryu's causing all this crazy havoc in the Freya Familia, just basically in their building. I remember she was locked up in the dungeon, and Horn more or less does it. And I love the fact, I immediately knew when Horn attacked Bell, I'm like, that's the Hestia knife. Like, as soon as you see it, you're like, she's attacking Bell with the Hestia knife. That's crazy. And the fact that she gets run through and then transforms into Seer was just, like, really a gut-wrenching moment. Like, that moment was wild. And the fact that she literally transforms into Seer and just, I won't call it taunting Bell. I think it's not fair to call it taunting, because it does seem like it's actually Seer's mentality. Weird is that his soul? I don't know how you word that. But yeah, and she even mentions like she's going insane. Like that's, it's 3 people, 2 bodies. Well, of course, like it's like dissociative personality disorder, where you wake up, you're like, where was I for the last 3 days, and why am I eating spaghetti? What? Don't understand it. Is it mom spaghetti? I don't know. So it's a really, really, really wild and crazy thing. And this whole back and forth between Belle and Horn and Seer and Freya and all that, he even confronts Freya and just basically like calls her out. And Freya like has to break it down. Basically, like, here's how all this worked. I can't believe you didn't figure it out. You are kind of a fool, but it is what it is. But we really got to talk about that big moment, that big, like, the walls came tumbling down. The Freya Familia is kind of caught in all their lies. And that's when Hestia was at the top of, I think she's the top, pretty sure it's the top of the Tower of Babel. And she kind of discovers that before Hermes had been charmed, he had basically put some of Hestia's blood in all those bundles of sticks. So basically, like I said before, Hestia's able to use the entire city more or less as like her cauldron. And as such, she breaks everybody in their spell. Everyone's just kind of comes to. There's even a great moment at the end where like Eyes comes to Belle's rescue and all this stuff. It is truly insane. This whole episode was just a masterclass in storytelling, if I do say so myself. And even if I did, like I said, even if I was critical of the animation, I do love the story. The story is really what gets you in this season, and it is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But at the end of the day, basically, the Freya Familia really does kind of like, you know, they kind of get caught in the loophole there. And I love the fact that at the final showdown, when Freya is caught in her web of lies, when Freya's got nowhere else to turn, when Hestia is like, "You're done. Give it up. Belle is mine." Knowing that she has the upper hand, Freya straight up is like, "Fine. I got nowhere else to turn. I got nowhere else to go. I challenge you to wargame." And it's not even fair. Like the size of the Hestia Familia versus the size of the Freya Familia. In a way, yes, was inevitable because Freya's just Freya at the end of the day. But it's brutal. Absolutely brutal. Because what is Hestia going to do? What can she do? Now, I think we already know based on the intro what is going to happen. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm not going to spoil it. I'll just say go watch the intro like 4 or 5 more times. You'll figure it out pretty quick. But it is completely nuts. The end of this season is going to be crazy. If you want to catch up, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, I believe this episode starts off volume 18 of the light novel. If you want to read ahead, go ham. I do highly recommend the light novels. I own them all. Like I said, sometimes I, as an adult, don't have time to sit down and read books like I would love to. But at the end of the day, it's super worth. Omori tells her. Actually, has 18 come out in the States yet? I don't know if 18 has. I'd have to double check that. That's something I have to check. I'll be honest with you. But phenomenal. Absolutely great. Let me know what you guys thought of the episode in the comments down below. I gushed on for almost as long as the episode lasts. But chef's kiss to the story. Little disappointed in the animation, especially considering the delays. But all said and done, can't wait for the next episode, guys. Absolutely cannot wait. And I'll catch you next week for episode 10 of Danmachi season 5. It's gonna be nuts, guys. It's gonna be crazy.